From Their Eyes, a Shadow of the Colossus based fic. Chapter 13. I do have eyes. Pelagia rested deep in the depths of the lake, enjoying the solitude it gave. The deep waters were a blessing to Pelagia, mainly due to the nature of his type of colossi. It was a trait shared by all his colossi, since they were all deep thinkers. Deep water was devoid of all life, except for the creatures that took time to think, or those who lived only to eat. The latter would never dare enter the realm of the colossi, since they could not compete with the size of the colossi. This particular time, Pelagia was actually thinking about the ruins that were part of his lake. They had not always been there, and they were not something Pelagia would have seen in the old land. The old lands, lakes, were always devoid of the ruins of the small people, as well as things that hunt in the water. This was because Pelagia's kind claimed most deep waters as their homes. They had been the only colossi to like living in the dark waters. Yes, there were other colossi who liked the water, but they quickly learned not to venture into their water. Some would think that colossi like Pelagia were territorial, but the truth was they liked being in the deep. They had loved the deep so much that the fear of losing access to the deep waters made Pelagia agree to a foolish move so long ago. It had been back when they lived in the old land, right after the plague of the shadow beings. Dormant had come to them and told them that the elders had deemed it necessary to drain their deep waters to add more water to the lake that surrounded the castle the Shadow Queen was kept in. Dormant had also said that the only solution was to destroy the castle. From there, Pelagia and his brethren had concluded that the Shadow Queen would be destroyed as well. It was all they had needed to join Dorman's forces. They had made their way through the underwater tunnels to the lake. Once they were there, they began firing on the castle, shooting bolts of energy from their horns. It lasted until another of their group realized the actions for the folly they were. Pelagia was the only one who failed to stop attacking, and when Dorman was stopped, he was the only one of their kind sent away from the homeland. For a moment, Pelagia was lost in that sad memory. That lasted for a time, until he heard Malice's voice in his head. The leader of the remaining colossi in the land had an urgency in his voice, and that gave Pelagia reason to be concerned. "Pelagia, we have a problem. One of the little people has returned, and he is being influenced by Dorman. We need to subdue him soon, or all will be lost. He has already wiped out the 11 before you. You must stop him." The urgency in Malice's voice told him that it was serious, but it was also a little person, one who must have gotten lucky, or help from Dorman. Thinking about that made Pelagia remember when the little people first came to the lands. His lake wasn't as deep as it was then. He was fine with them living on the edges of the lake, but he wasn't thrilled if they had ventured too far into the lake. Not that it happened often. The only other who dared swim in his water was Hydrus, and he stopped that quickly. The way the little people were welcome changed, however, when Dorman had started his old tricks. The people had been welcome to the world the Colossi had been exiled to, but they had to worship and follow Dorman. Once they started to balk, Dorman had started his old tricks, and part of it had been to raise the levels of the lake. The action had killed so many of the little people and added features to the underwater world that did not look or feel natural. For a moment, he noticed movement up at the surface of the water. Could that be the little person entering his lake? He decided it was time to check this intruder out. With that, he started his way up the sloping lake bed. He remembered how some of the little people reacted when they first saw him. They all thought Pelagia was a monster, and several had run. Now that everything was flooded, the only way the little people could enter or exit the area was to swim. While he did move slow in the water, a swimming little person would be no match for his other talents. He started breaching the surface, and he could see the figure on one of the small islets on the surface. Most of them were all that remained of the structures made by the little people, so Pelagia had no problems with destroying them. They ruined the beauty of the lake, even though they weren't part of the lake to begin with. As it neared the islet, the little person jumped at him. He tried to aim at the little man so the bolts from his horns would strike down the danger. To his surprise, the target was gone, and he now felt something climbing on his head. Could the little person be on him? That wasn't a bad thing, since the most important area on him, the sigil containing the part of Dorman's power that he held, was on his chest, and that was underwater. All of a sudden, he felt something on his head. It made him want to move away from the direction the pain was coming from. He started heading over to another of the structures in the lake. If the little man truly was there, he might be able to knock the little man off his head and onto it, making an easy target for the blasts. Once he was near it, he saw the little person jump off. Pelagia surged out of the water, placing two of its legs on the top of the structure. As he did this, he fired a blast at the little person from both of his horns. The movement was quick, and he was certain he had at least hit the intruder. Once he was in position, however, he looked around the platform. He hoped that one of his blasts had knocked the little person into the lake. In the moments after he got into position, he realized he hadn't gotten the little man. He felt something crawling on his chest. In a second, he felt a stabbing pain right where the sigil was. He started to lower himself, but as he did, he felt a second stab. Hopefully, the little man would be too focused to realize that he was entering the water again, and might even drown. It was only in the water. He was only in the water for a few moments, and then he felt something on his back. He couldn't believe it. The little man hadn't drowned, but managed to get on his back again. Well, there was only one way to take care of this nuisance. He was going to submerge back deep into the pit. He could outlast any little person. The little people needed to eat and sleep. He didn't need to worry about those two things. Before he could even head back to the deep parts, however, the pain in his head started up again. Again, he felt like he was being directed towards another structure. If he had to be directed there, he was going to make sure the little man didn't get another chance at the sigil. He just had to make sure he would start firing at the little person the second he saw him. Once he reached the second little area, he kept his eyes locked on the top. Soon enough, the little man jumped into view. Pelagia didn't delay and focused the bolts that came from his horns on the little man. For a moment, he saw the little man go flying into the water. He took that moment to get his forelegs onto the eyelet and keep his focus on his foe. Unfortunately, he lost track of the little man. Had the little man been killed and sank under the water, to his horror, he felt the little man on him again, right where the sigil was. The little man had managed to get into his blind spot, and now the little man was going to kill him. He felt the first stab in the sigil, and his legs started to buckle. He hoped that the little man lost his grip from the sudden movement, but his hope shattered when he felt another stab, right where the sigil was. With that pain, he felt his legs completely give out, and he started to fall into the water. As he hit the water, he noticed his sight was failing. He would not be greeted by the underwater sights as he died, and Dorman's essence left him. He tried to take solace in the fact that the little man might drown when the essence entered him. As his brain ceased to function, he hoped the little man would be defeated, and he could return to the land of the living. Dorman could feel himself getting stronger as Pelagia sank beneath the waters, devoid of life. It had been a shame when Pelagia and his kind realized what Dorman was doing. They had been perfect for Dorman, with their apparent sightlessness and the ability to shoot blasts from their horns. It was a shame to see Pelagia fall, but it was needed. Well, it was only a matter of time now. With only 4 more colossi left, it should take the little man no time to finish them off. He amended that it would take no time if he was prepared for the fight. The next one could be deadly. If the little man fell, that is. It would be with phalanx. Even Dorman had to admit that he still didn't know why he had recruited that one. Those flying colossi only liked to fly. It gave them too much enjoyment, and the result was that they were carefree. Not a good trait for an army, no matter what the size. It did make good for keeping a part of Dorman's essence in it, though. That meant someone had to climb on phalanx when he was flying, someone who could survive the great fall. Dorman could help with that detail. He would do so once the shadow beings brought the little man back to him. It would be another part of the little person's identity gone. Not that much of it was remaining anymore.